right, State Senator Scott Wiener. Hi, how are you? How you doing?
I'm hanging in there, Manny. How are
No
you?
question. You're not supposed to ask how you're doing anymore because
I
it's
know it's a loaded question these days.
yeah, hard to
I'm doing a lot.
ask.
I'm doing a lot better than a lot of people are doing, so I'm grateful for that.
I bet you've been asked that question. How are you a lot? So first of all, I just want to welcome the folks who are tuning in right now. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's 7 o'clock. It's Wednesday, April 1st, April 2020, a month that we will all remember. These are Manny's Super Civic Cyber Conversations. It's our opportunity to continue to engage the public civically in a time of need. Thank you for being a part of it. You can tag us at Welcome to Manny's. Also, at the end of this, we're going to put up the link to become a sponsor of Manny's. We really appreciate your support since we are closed. We're offering these conversations to the public for free. Scott Wiener, we are so honored and so lucky to have you with us tonight. I know you're extremely busy, so we're going to keep this conversation tight. For folks who are tuning in, you can ask your questions for Senator Scott Wiener at any time. You can type them into the Q&A box, and we're going to get to questions for our state senator in about 15, 20 minutes. All right, Scott, let's just jump right into it, okay? So the first thing I want to ask is, what are your Passover plans? Because I'm really nervous about Passover this year. It's the first Passover in a long time. I'm not going to see my family. What are you going to do?
I'm probably going to do a digital Seder. I think that's what I'll be doing. I'm super embarrassed. I'm officially a terrible Jew because I'm having an official, my official town hall through the Senate, and it got delayed because of this whole disaster, and it got scheduled on the first night of Passover, and the mail already went out by the time we caught it. And so fortunately it's at 7:30, so I can do an early Seder and then do that. Yes. But I feel really guilty, and I'm not telling my mother because she would be furious at me.
I hope she's not listening to this right now.
Yeah. She may be, who knows?
You heard it here first. My first question is about your family as well. Well, I guess this is my second question. Your sister, she's a frontline physician in the Manhattan Hospital. She's an infectious disease specialist.
Yeah.
How is she doing? How are your conversations with her, and what is she telling you about what's going on the ground in New York?
Well, she's doing okay. She's a infectious disease physician. Her practice is mostly HIV. She works in a clinic associated with or affiliated with Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. But then she got pulled into the hospital because it's all hands on deck, and so she has told me about just. I mean, you can imagine it's very hard because all the beds are full, all the ICUs are full, everything is full, and she's consulting on COVID cases. She thought she might have had COVID, but she tested negative, so it is very hard.
So how do you think? Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that she's okay, and I'm praying for her and for your whole family. How do you think we're doing out here, Scott? I think that the general sentiment right now is that we feel pretty proud of how early our steps were, but like you're in the meat of everything. How do you feel like the Bay Area is doing? What's your prognosis for our future?
Well, I'm very proud of San Francisco and the Bay Area and California because we were and remain out ahead. You may recall that San Francisco actually took preliminary steps, I think, before pretty much anyone else in terms of limiting sizes of gatherings. Yeah. And it really makes sense because San Francisco has always, for many years, been a leader nationally and internationally on public health. When you look at what the HIV/AIDS epidemic did to our city, and our response to it in the 80s and 90s was to invest deeply in public health infrastructure. And that is paying off now because we have the best public health department in the country. Our mayor, London Breed, is doing an amazing job. Dr. Grant Colfax, our director of public health, who came from HIV world, is doing an amazing job. We are very lucky. We are not out of the woods, and we are doing all the right things, but we have to keep at it because we could take a turn for the worse. We just have to stay focused.
So that's the hard question, and I bet the question that you're being asked a lot, which is hard to answer. But the hardest thing about this, obviously, in addition to how scary it is all the unknowns. You know,
Yeah.
how long is my business, you know, going to have to stay shut? How long are we supposed to stand in our apartments? And you're, as a legislator and as a representative, like, are you getting any information about, you know, if by a certain time, you know, can we really expect after May 3rd to start to go back to real life? Like, what are we going to have to see to do that?
Well, I think it's, you know, it's hard. I don't want to speculate. What I will say is we're doing the right things now, and we've seen some preliminary, you know, positive indications, but it's way too early to pat ourselves on the back and say that, you know, we're nailing this, and we could take a turn for the worse. Obviously, you know, I think you know, May is a possibility, but it's not definite. And I think there's a whole spectrum of what could happen in terms of, you know, continuing the stay-at-home order and the closures, or having some sort of modified version where we allow some, you know, gradual additional activity. There is a school of thought that you base this on, maybe on again, off again, social distancing based on what your available hospital and ICU beds are. So if you're doing well with keeping hospitalizations down, then you can allow for more. But this is going to be with us for a while, and it's going to be painful, and it could be on again, off again. But you know what? In the end, it'll be over, and we'll have a vaccine, we'll have a treatment, we'll have eventually, one presumes, herd immunity. So we will get there. And this isn't the first time that humanity has had to deal with a huge threat. It won't be the last time, and I think we're going to get through it.
Yeah. Okay, let's just go to some of the stuff that state government has been doing. And it's, you know, we've only been in this for a couple weeks, right? And it just feels like there's so much news and so much that's happened. But you are in the state government. And so do you feel proud of what our state government has employed to help both business owners and individuals? Do you feel like it's been enough? Are you seeing more coming on the horizon? Like the response to help out people who are being affected by this. How do you feel about it? And kind of maybe you can also explain for the folks who are tuning in what the state has done to provide relief and support for both our small business owners and the folks who've lost their jobs.
Sure. So I think a lot of good things are happening. I think Governor Newsom is doing an amazing job leading the state, and then of course the mayor locally, I give very high grades. But there's always more that we need to do. And I think our state government right now and our city, it's like drinking water from a fire hose. And it takes time to get everything right. And some of the really positive things that have been happening, we passed an emergency $1.1 billion appropriation, and that money is going into triage, expanding hospital capacity for personal protective gear, for purchasing more ventilators. For really deeply investing to transition homeless people into healthier settings, whether it's renting hotel rooms or what have you. We've been expanding our social safety net, making sure people have access to, for example, food benefits, CalFresh, and other safety net programs during these difficult times. We covered California, which is our Obamacare insurance, reopened enrollment through June because people are losing their insurance and we want to get people covered. We are reducing our prison population, so that does not become a major vector. And we have delayed tax payments for income taxes until July 15th. We haven't for property taxes, but we effectively are because the county tax collectors are, I think, going to be liberal in granting waivers of penalties. An area where we have, and then of course unemployment because of the federal package has been dramatically expanded. You can now get up to $1,050 a week for 4 months, and freelancers and self-employed people are covered, which is an amazing step forward. Where we are not doing enough is in protecting renters from eviction.
Yeah.
And preventing small businesses and nonprofits from being evicted. And I've introduced legislation and I'm co-authoring legislation to put blanket moratoriums on both commercial and residential evictions. But we're relying on the governor now and his executive orders. He did issue an executive order on evictions. It did not go far enough, in my opinion.
It made it possible for people to be not evicted on paper, but for them to be evicted after the fact?
Right. So to be clear, the governor authorized cities to enact their own eviction protections, and Mayor Breed issued a very strong eviction moratorium. So that's great. But not many cities have. So for a huge number of renters in California, if they don't pay their rent today, April 1st, they can be effectively evicted on paper, and they can't be physically evicted until a few months go by. But that eviction on paper can then be enforced after the emergency is over. And in my view, it's not, I've been very vocal about this. I hate to ever disagree with my friend Gavin Newsom publicly. We have our disagreements, and this is one where I have been public about it because we need people to focus exclusively on health right now and not be concerned if they're going to have housing in a month or in 2 months. We don't want people to hold on to their housing during the pandemic, and then when the emergency ends, they're immediately evicted. We want to get people back up on their feet quickly. So we need to stabilize people now, and it has to be the case that failure to pay rent now should never result in you being evicted. We'll need to deal with how the back rent gets taken care of. Same with back mortgage payments. We need to do it in an equitable way, because we also don't want people to get hit the minute the emergency is over with 2 or 3 months worth of back rent that they have to pay immediately or they get evicted. So we're not there yet, but a lot of us are very dedicated to making sure that we're protecting renters and protecting small businesses and nonprofits, because we don't need mass evictions of renters. We also don't need permanent mass closures of small businesses because they lose their spaces.
And the way you think we prevent that is by the state and local municipalities basically telling landlords that they cannot and should not evict people. There's just probably not enough money to basically pay people's rent, right? Like in Australia, they just gave $25,000 to each small business, basically to have them pay their rent and their payroll. But
a couple things. Even though the federal rescue package was not perfect by any stretch, it had the two best parts about it were, number one, the expansion of unemployment.
Yes.
Because if someone is getting $1,050 a month, a week in unemployment, it's going to be a pay cut for a lot of people. But that, at least, there are a lot of renters who will be able to use that to pay their rent. Not everyone, but many will.
Democrats for making that happen.
Yeah, and then yes, God bless Nancy Pelosi. And then in addition, it contains a dramatic expansion of the federal small business loan program, and it is forgivable if you keep your staff on payroll. And if you've already laid off your staff, you have until, I think, the end of June to rehire your staff and then get the loan and then have it mostly or completely forgiven.
Yeah, I was just on a call earlier today with the Valencia Merchants Board, and we were all talking about these loan programs and the bar owners. And, I think all the merchants associations all over the country and all the small business groups are all taking in the information of these federal loans. And I'm jumping on a webinar with my bank tomorrow to get all the information. And it sounds like if the PPE loan program really is forgivable, it could actually really go a long way to helping businesses fill this gap. Okay, so last thing on this, the eviction stuff. So what do you think is going to happen? I saw you sent a memorandum to the governor. You've introduced a bill. Do you think there's going to be a revision of kind of what's happening, or do you think they're going to take up your bill, or what's going to happen?
And again, San Francisco renters are in a better place because we have the mayor's very protective order. But in terms of the governor, there's been a lot of pushback and organizing around having a more comprehensive executive order. And again, I'm not trying to be critical of the governor. He's done a lot of great things in this emergency, but this is one where we just want him to go further. And we're going to continue to work with him to try to get there.
Okay, I have two quick questions about the LGBT community, because you have been such a fierce advocate for our people and our community. And there are two things that I've gotten a bunch of questions on whether or not folks should still take PrEP, or like there's a lot of rumors out there that like PrEP as an antiretroviral is like can help people prevent people from getting the virus. So what do you know about PrEP, and what advice would you give to folks who are on PrEP? And then the second thing is this FDA ban on us giving blood, like so fucked up. And you're getting all energized about it. And I want to give you the opportunity to tell folks who are listening about what's going
on. Sure. So in terms of the LGBT community, we are at higher risk because of higher rates of HIV. Now, if you are virally suppressed, then you're in a really good place. But for people who don't know that they're positive, or they're positive but they're not virally suppressed, they are at higher risk. We have higher rates of cancer, higher smoking rates, and so there are a lot of and higher rates of homelessness. So we're a higher risk community. And in terms of PrEP, there was some indication that some kinds of HIV antiretrovirals might be protective. I don't know if that's really been proven, and I don't think PrEP falls in that category in terms of what the mix is. People should be taking PrEP if they are sexually active. In terms of, it's very up. The blood ban it's so deeply upsetting to me. So for those who don't know, for many years, until about 4 or 5 years ago, the FDA said that if you or a man who had sex with another man at any point since 1977, you were permanently banned from giving blood. They then went through a process to say, okay, this is not a scientifically based ban, because it doesn't apply to straight people, no matter how many sex partners you've had or what kind of sexual activity you're engaging in. And it's just, and the testing, the HIV testing of this blood is so precise now that it just didn't make sense. So they went through a process, and we were so optimistic that they would repeal the ban. Instead, they said, okay, gay and bi men can give as long as you've been celibate for a year. And when I first read that, and some of the news came out, oh, they got rid of the ban, I read that, and I had to read it like 5 times. I'm like, I must be missing something here, because this is like a joke. And so that's what it is now. So it's effectively still a ban. We have this severe blood shortage now because people, a lot of the blood banks have had to contract, and people aren't going out to donate. And so they need blood, and you have this whole group of people, myself included, and you. Did I just out you? I hope I didn't just out you.
Oh, that I'm gay? Oh,
yeah.
No.
Okay.
I'm out of space.
Yes. But we can't help. So I'm partnering with the American Red Cross, and we have a blood drive, which I'm sorry is completely full now because there's so much demand. For next Tuesday, and we call it Give for a Gay, #Give for a Gay. That if you are gay or bi and you're banned from giving, find someone to give for you on your behalf. Or if you are able to give, you're not banned, give on behalf of someone who is banned. And so I asked Mayor Breed to give on my behalf, and she agreed. So, and then the last thing that we just found out today was that if someone has COVID-19 and recovers, your plasma, you can donate plasma, which can then be used to save people's lives. But guess what? We're also banned from donating plasma. So there are gay and bi men who have recovered from COVID-19, who have the antibodies, who could donate and help save people's lives, and the FDA won't let them.
So we're going to get to questions, folks who have tuned in. So if you have questions, please write them in now. I have one last question for Senator Wiener, and then we're going to get to your questions. Okay. We have been, I think this is conversation number like 50. And the first one we did was with Helena. And one of the running themes has been, Scott, that, the symbol of San Francisco on our flag is the phoenix, right? And our city's history is so enmeshed with these major moments of crisis or tragedy, and then the city kind of coming out of the fire and the ashes, and we are a city known for our resilience, right? And so I wanted to ask you about what you see, what you're hopeful for, and how you see San Francisco, our San Francisco, the San Francisco of our time, kind of continuing that legacy of being a phoenix and being resilient and coming out of trial and tribulation even stronger.
Yeah, the one thing that I think in the years leading up to this terrible emergency, people were getting really down on San Francisco. It was like and we all we love our city and we bash it right around the disaster of homelessness and the cost of housing and just everything was constantly just beating up on ourselves as a city. And yes, there are plenty of things that we can do better. But we have a history of having horrible things happen to our community and then coming out of it stronger. This is a city that had an earthquake and most of the city burned down in 1906, and we came back roaring from that disaster. In the 80s and 90s, you cannot overstate the toll that HIV took on San Francisco more than pretty much any other city. And particularly, I moved to the Castro in 1997 as a 27-year-old gay man, and antiretrovirals had just been approved a couple of years before, and so it was starting to come back, but the neighborhood had been decimated. And San Francisco and the Castro, we came back roaring. And so we will do the same here.
We will do the same here in large part because of civic and political leaders like you who are fighting for us and representing us and doing such a great job. So thank you, Scott. All right, let's do questions. Barak, what areas of state government what are the areas of state government where you think there's too much regulation and administrative burden? And how might you lessen that a little bit? Okay, it's a general question.
I think there are, I think we have a lot of well-intentioned regulations of small businesses that go a little bit overboard, and even though they're all in isolation, make a lot of sense when you put them all together. It can cause a lot of troubles for small business. And I'm not talking about worker protections. I'm talking about some of the, and this is state and local, some of the permits that are required and the fees that can just get a little bit out of control. I think housing is actually a big one. We over-regulate housing, both by the state and locally, and thus make it hard or impossible to build enough housing. And that's over-regulation of every form of housing, affordable housing for low-income people, market rate housing, in-law units, everything. We over-regulate it. I'm not saying there shouldn't be reg. Of course, we need to have good rules in place, but we tend to stifle housing. We make it really hard to build infrastructure. There's over-regulation of building new public transportation, new bike lanes, new sewer facilities, new schools. We make it hard and long and expensive, and we undermine ourselves.
There's talk of a big infrastructure bill that the president will finally come to the mat for. Are you hopeful that some of that will filter down to housing bonds and money for the state of California and for local?
Well, I hope so. I mean, in the recently passed stimulus or rescue package, it included $25 billion for public transportation because our transit systems are flailing right now. BART is down 93% in ridership, and so I was pleasantly shocked that the speaker and others were able to get $25 billion, and $1.3 billion of that is coming to the Bay Area to support our transit system. So we can do it. I hope that they do a mega infrastructure investment, and we're ready here in the Bay Area to tap into that. The last stimulus, which was smaller in 2009, we were able to tap into that well. In San Francisco, we're really good, very, very savvy about tapping into pots of money. Sometimes people get mad at us because we get more than perhaps they think we should.
We deserve it. We're the best city in the country. Andres, what about small businesses that do not have employees or payroll, therefore don't qualify for any of the forgivable SBA loans? Andres is an acupuncturist practicing in SF for over 20 years. Their office rent is over $5K a month, another $5K for mortgage, income went to zero, and not getting any financial support because they don't have a big payroll bill.
Well, still should be eligible for the small business loans.
Yeah.
But you also, if you're self-employed, you're eligible for unemployment. And granted, I'm not saying, it's up to $1,050 a week. That's a pay cut for a lot of people, but that it's a dramatic expansion. And it used to be, before this law was passed, self-employed were not eligible for unemployment. You are now. And so feel free to contact my office if you need any help or information about that.
Thank you, Scott. Adam wants to know, how will we protect funding streams for the K12 education system into the next fiscal year?
The state budget is going to be exceptionally difficult this year. I mean, we saw the numbers come out today from San Francisco, potentially more than $1 billion shortfall for the next fiscal year. We haven't gotten to projections yet at the state level, but we are very reliant in California. Our state government is overly reliant on income taxes on high earners and capital gains taxes. And I'm all in favor of income taxes on high earners and capital gains taxes. I support progressive taxation, but we don't balance that out with other more stable kinds of taxes. And so we have a boom bust budget because when you go into a downturn, the first things that collapse are capital gains taxes and income taxes on high earners. And so we're going to see potentially massive deficits. Unlike the federal government, we can't engage in deficit spending. We have to balance our budget. In California, almost all states, or maybe all states, have that requirement. And so we can't run a big stimulus deficit like the federal government can. So we are going to have to make some very hard choices. Our Constitution protects funding for K through 12, actually K through 12 plus community college spending, but there will be cuts because the size of the general fund will go down. There's a lot of energy and a lot of support in the legislature to go above and beyond what's required for our kids, and so that will be there. But we're also going to have to, we need to make sure we're protecting, our frail seniors and people living with disabilities who need in-home care. We need to support our foster youth. We need to make sure we're investing in our healthcare system. So there's going to be a lot of hard choices, but I think we'll be able to balance it, but there will be pain. I think we should go to the ballot with a major, very large infrastructure bond here in California. That's the one form of debt we are allowed to go into if the voters approve a bond. And that can help get money into the economy, build, transition to a green economy, build sustainable infrastructure, and also help build out the infrastructure in our healthcare system.
Hey, Scott, we have a ton of questions for you. Do you have 10 more minutes for us?
I do.
Thank you. There are a couple questions about how the average person can help frontline hospital and healthcare workers. Joanna asks, how can the public and small businesses help? Another person says, how is there a way maybe we can push our $1,200 stimulus check if we don't need it towards where it's needed most? And also, how the state government is working to help get more ventilators and PPE for hospitals and healthcare workers. So how do frontline workers?
Yes. So the impactful way that we can help our frontline healthcare workers is to socially distance and to stay home and to stay healthy. And if you do go out for a walk, stay away from other people. And I know we keep hearing that, but it's true, because what is damaging to our frontline healthcare workers is to be just overrun with people who have COVID-19. It overwhelms the system. It makes it more likely that they're going to get infected. And so that's what we need to do. There are various funds. I tweeted one out early this morning, funds that you can contribute to help frontline workers and to purchase more PPE and other equipment for them, so that they don't have to do what we saw in Oakland, where nurses were wearing garbage bags. Yeah. And so there are places you can donate. I forget the name of it. It's I'm sorry, I forget the name of the fund, but I tweeted it early this morning. And then there are other, interesting ideas. There's another Scott Wiener, he spells his name the same way too, I-V-4-E, in New York, who's the pizza guy. He's like this pizza expert. I get Google alerts for him, so I follow him. And he has started this service called Slice Out Hunger. And they're now, they will deliver pizzas to hospitals for the workers there. And that's a smaller thing, but it's something. We also need to make sure that we are investing in where healthcare workers don't live close to the hospital, allowing them to not have to go all the way home every night, and a place for them to stay. So that's also an effort.
Okay, an anonymous question. Property taxes are due no later than April 10th.
Yeah.
What kind of forbearance for this tax payment? And then on the similar vein, there were a couple of questions, Scott, about, it's great that, we're getting protections from for renters, but what about folks who need to pay property taxes or their mortgage payments?
Yes, so property taxes and mortgage payments, and the two go hand in hand, right? If you're because if you're a landlord who's not getting rent, or maybe some of your tenants can't pay, and then you have to pay the mortgage and property taxes, that is a problem. So whatever solution we come up with in the end around, back rent, back mortgage payments, has to be sort of equitable and taking the whole system into account. But for mortgages, so the governor was able to negotiate with except for Bank of America, all of the major mortgage lenders, a large number of them, and a bunch of the smaller ones too, an agreement that they will do I think it's a 90-day forbearance. I think it's 90, not 60. I need to go back and just double check. But it's a multi-month forbearance. But you have to call the mortgage company and ask for the forbearance. You won't get a penalty. And also, they won't report you to a credit agency. You need to explicitly ask them, please don't report me to the credit agency. And so there is a way to delay your mortgage payments. And then on property taxes, under state law, the counties which collect the property taxes do not have the legal ability to extend that. But what Jose Cisneros, our treasurer tax collector, and other county treasurer tax collectors have said is that people who can't pay their property taxes on April 10th due to this emergency should immediately fill out a form to request a waiver of penalties. And while they can't commit to granting the waiver, I think it's a little bit of a wink, wink, nod, nod. They're going to look favorably upon it, and you can download that from their website.
Okay, we just have, I think, two more questions. One is about state relief, or just what's going on with folks who are undocumented workers. A lot of times it feels like those folks are getting left out of the equation. So how are you thinking about our undocumented workers and what relief is being provided to them?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the federal economic rescue, as always happens in Congress, excluded undocumented workers. And I think that's terrible and just atrocious. But unfortunately, the politics in Washington, at least until now, have not allowed for that. In California, we take a different approach. We have, for example, our state Medicaid program, Medi-Cal. If you're up to the age of 26 and undocumented, you can be covered under Medi-Cal. I believe, and others, a lot of people are working on this. We want to expand that also to seniors and hopefully eventually everyone. But we have expanded access to that and various other services. So basically, if there's no federal money in a safety net service in California, stuff that we're funding on our own, we can include, and we do include, undocumented residents. These are people who are living here, raising families here, working here, starting businesses here, paying taxes here, helping make California the great place that it is, and also are some of the most at risk, especially working on the front lines, working in service sector jobs. people who are in agriculture and are making sure we have food and putting themselves at risk for COVID-19. So we need to be there for them, and there's a pretty deep commitment in the legislature to do that.
Okay, and the last question is, are we going to be okay?
We are going to be, we are eventually going to be okay. And in a lot of ways we're okay now. When I say we're okay now, there's a lot of enormous pain right now. There are people who are getting sick and dying right now. There are people who are unemployed, who are not able to make the rent. Enormous pain right now. But we as a community, when I say in one way we're okay, it's because we are pulling together, and it's the best of San Francisco, and people are checking on their neighbors and making sure that seniors have, are getting their groceries without going to the grocery store. And people are contributing money, and people who don't have money are finding other ways to give back and are volunteering at the food bank. And we're just pulling together in the way that San Francisco does, because this is a city that, we know we're all in it together. So that the spirit of San Francisco says that as much pain as we're in now, we are going to get to a place where we're going to be more than okay. We are going to continue to be the greatest city and the greatest community on the planet, and we're going to get there. And I know it's hard. We're going to struggle with mental health issues and other huge challenges as people struggle through this period, but we're going to get there, and we're going to be stronger for it.
Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the time. I know you're extremely busy. As we close this, I just want to point people to the website to become a sponsor of Manny's. It's joinit.org/o/Manny's. My small business is closed right now, and so if you are able, would love to ask you to become a sponsor of Manny's. It's $36 a month. We could really use your help to help us get through this period. I'm one of the small businesses that needs the help. So if you can go to joinit.org/o/Manny's and become a sponsor, I'd really appreciate it. Scott, our state senator, thank you so much for fighting for us and for being such a stalwart for us in the state Senate and beyond. We're proud of you. You can tag us at Welcome to Manny's. You can tag Scott at Scott Wiener on Twitter. Did I get that right? Is it at Scott?
Scott_Wiener.
At Scott, because did the pizza man take the other Scott Wiener?
No, someone else took the full one. I don't know who it is, but yeah.
At Scott_Wiener. Thank you, Sam, for being the operator of this call. Thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate it. To Jupiter and Ram for being on the Manny's team. Thank you, Scott, to your amazing team in your Senate office. They're so excellent and smart and amazing. Thank you, Katie. What else? Did I forget anything? Happy Passover, Scott. I wish you a good Seder. To anyone celebrating Ramadan or Easter or Passover, I wish you all a good holiday. And Scott, I will see you soon. Okay.
Thank you, Manny. Hang in there.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.